Alright everyone, we're back again and we have another problem we have to discuss. This problem is one I really wanted to talk about because I've seen a lot of people legitimately confused or misunderstanding why this character has suddenly become a complaint. And that problem I'm talking about is of course going to be Johnny. Now if you saw our previous video, which you should go watch, where we talked about why Slayer has been a big complaint in the community, well, people have also been complaining about Johnny, though to a lesser extent. But in the case of Johnny, I've seen people very confused about why he's being talked about now, because yeah, for most of Strive's lifespan, he's been considered a relatively weak character. But all of a sudden, a lot of people are talking about him now. And while Johnny does not have as many, I guess, statistics or results going against him like Slayer does currently, I do think there's a lot of contributing factors as to why Johnny is kind of a complaint right now. And I want to shed some light on what's actually really happening with the character, and also talk about why he's considered so strong right now. Before we get into it though, as usual, I do want to note down in the comments below for those of you on YouTube, what do you guys think about Johnny? Do you think that Johnny is currently overpowered? Do you think maybe he's kind of overrated? What do you think his general kind of place is right now in this ending season 3 meta? Let me know in the comments below, and while you're down there, if you do enjoy the video, please consider dropping a like and subbing to the channel. As usual, I'm going to mention it, likes and comments really help the YouTube algorithm, so it's always super appreciated. And you're also going to want to make sure you're subscribed as well, because you're not going to want to miss out on our future videos, especially once we get to covering season 4. With that all said, if Johnny wasn't a problem before, why is he a problem now? Let's talk about that. So before we get into talking about how Johnny is now, I do think there's a couple of things that we need to set up first. So first of all, yes, it's true. Johnny was considered a really weak character for most of his life in Strive. At least over here in NA, I know over in Japan, they actually had a higher opinion of him, usually putting him around the mid tier, whereas in NA, people would say he's like a bottom 3 character usually. However, I do want to talk around the Evo time, because I know around Evo, there's a lot of talks amongst high level players that maybe Johnny wasn't quite as bad as we initially thought he was. See, the thing about Johnny is he is a character who actually has a lot of really good strengths. He has some very powerful situations he can put himself in. The problem with Johnny before is that he's a character that has a lot of glaring weaknesses as well, and specifically, this is the important part, he had weaknesses that prevented him from putting himself in his ideal situation as often as he would like. And also, if we're talking about Evo, there's also the example of MJ Karase actually doing really well with Johnny in that tournament, getting, I believe, 13th as well. And that was back before Johnny even got his buffs. So I think part of what's happening is there was already this natural occurrence of people thinking a little bit higher of Johnny right around the same time that the character got buffed. One other piece to this puzzle as well that I think is important to establish is that Johnny is a very popular character. If you go play Strive Online in the tower anywhere, whether it's floor 10 or Celestial or what have you, you're going to see a lot of Johnny players. He's like basically an unavoidable character. And importantly, the way that they changed Johnny is they made his strong things more accessible. More people are capable of putting themselves in those situations where Johnny is considered strong. So while Johnny doesn't have necessarily an absurd win rate in tower currently, he actually did near the early parts of this patch. I remember the first month of this patch, Johnny had an absurd win rate on Celestial early on in the patch. Whereas now it's kind of evened out a little bit, but the important thing to realize is that Johnny is super common, and people are doing his strong things very frequently. And when a character is that common, he's kind of affecting the majority of the player base, right? Public perception like that is really important to understanding why people are complaining about a character like they are. Because again, it's not like Johnny himself is like the best character in the game. There are other characters that are top tier and other characters that are better than him. Anyways, with that all out of the way, let's actually show some examples of why Johnny is considered such a strong character now. So first of all, like I said, Johnny is a character who has really good strengths. Obviously, you know, most people are aware of like Card Oki, for example. Card Oki giving him like instant overheads with Misfer. This is a strong situation. He is able to establish just high-low Oki that is, you know, you basically just have to block it. There's no other way around it. And it can be very high reward. It guard crushes you on block. This situation is very good, but previously he wasn't very good at putting himself in that position. He also had really good normals for the most part. His 5k is a really good 5k. His far slash is incredible, as we all know. His 6k is also a really good normal. So there are a lot of strengths for this character. He had a lot of good qualities. The problem was more so that he couldn't put himself in a position to use those qualities as often as he would like. So while we go over what has changed about him, just keep in mind that he actually did have a lot of good things before, just you didn't get to use them as often. And that's a really important part of this discussion, because one of the big questions people have is, why are people complaining about Johnny doing things now that he could do before? And really the answer comes down to accessibility. So anyways, let's talk about what changed about him. Well, the first one is the change to his dash. Now previously, Johnny had a big weakness with his dash because his dash is unlike most other dashes in the game, where he can't cancel his dash into other actions outside of, he can cancel the startup into a jump. Other than that, he can't dash into a button, he can't dash into a block. This is a very big limitation in this game because dash blocking and just dashing into a button are two very common tactics players will use with other characters. In this version of the game though, they sped up his dash by a lot. So while he still can't cancel his dash into something, his dash is so much faster now. I don't remember exactly by how much. I want to say it was like 3 or 4 frames faster now, which is a lot for a fighting game. Speeding up something by that much is a lot in a fighting game. And this pretty much changes the complete dynamic of how you would approach fighting Johnny with most characters. Most characters wanted to play at a range where Johnny would have to dash if he wanted to create space, or gain space rather. But in order to dash, you would be taking the risk that if someone was actually focused, they could try to check your dash on reaction. Similarly, Johnny kind of had a hard problem getting throws in his offense. While his throw knockdown was actually really good, he had trouble throwing people because committing to a dash in his offense was very slow. That's not the case anymore. Because his dash is so fast, you can't react to him in neutral anymore. You basically just have to guess when he's going to dash at you, so it's much like other characters. And he's actually able to get throws in his offense. Dash up into throw is actually just unreactable now. You can technically tech the throw on reaction, but that leaves you open to getting hit by things like dash up and Senga, like this. So if you're trying to attack it on reaction, you're going to get hit by Nsenga, and then he gets a combo off of it. So this change alone changes so much about the character. If this is the only change he got, it fixes so many of his problems. It also improves some of his Oki, some of his combos, all of that. If this is his only change, he still would have shot up the tier list by a considerable amount. The next change that is a big deal is that they improved the hitbox on his 5H, and the reason this is important is because that this makes it to where things like /5H combos much more consistently. His far slash is a really good button. It's one of the best far slashes in the game, in fact. But previously, he had trouble converting off of it unless he wanted to either A, spend Wild Assault, which you don't always have available to you, or you might not want to always spend it, or you had to just cancel into Misfer, and Misfer is technically punishable and block, so just buffering it was kind of unideal. Another reason why this is specifically so good is that on a crouching hit, 5H will actually combo into dash Misfer low for a hard knockdown. So doing something like that is actually a really good knockdown, because from there, he can throw out a card, dash up, and then do, you know, a high-low or whatever. And that is the entire thing the character wants to do. So going back to what I was saying before, where a lot of it is about accessibility, there are so many more situations where he can create situations where you get hit by things because of his dash. And there are more situations where he can be rewarded meaningfully because of the 5H buff. The last big change he got as well is to Misfer, and that's that they made Misfer actually cause a big counter hit effect. So if he hits somebody with counter hit Misfer, this will either improve his knockdown. So in the case of something like Kang Misfer, he gets way better Oki from this now. He can actually like push you to the corner and run offense, which is crazy different than what it was before. And in some cases, if you're close enough, you can like combo off of it, or you can combo into card super. So there's a lot of improvements in that regard as well. This just makes Misfer way scarier to get hit by. So Misfer was already pretty good in neutral, it just was low reward. Now they made the reward way more threatening, and they also made his pressure better because getting frame trapped by Misfer is more detrimental. Now, one thing that is super misunderstood about this character is that Misfer is punishable. Now, it is true, technically it is punishable, it's -15. So one thing you'll notice is that most of the time when a move makes contact in this game, the game freezes a little bit. That's a very brief window, but this is referred to as hit stop. And hit stop is really important because it gives players time to react to something happening to them. However, if you look at Misfer, Misfer has such an absurdly low amount of hit stop. It's actually one of the only moves in the game that has a unique amount of hit stop. To my understanding, it's 3 frames, and most moves have way more than 3 frames of hit stop. So while it is true Misfer is punishable, it's -15. One, if you're spacing Misfer, most characters aren't going to be close enough to punish it anyways. I play Ram, who's one of the best characters at punishing it, and there's still a lot of times where I can't punish it. But on top of that, being able to react in a scenario when a Johnny player just kind of randomly busts out a Misfer, and being able to punish it is way different in practice than it is on paper. There's a lot of little things about this character's game plan that people kind of misunderstand as to why it's so strong. And when you put everything together, what I was just talking about now, you see how they allow Johnny to access his strengths so much more frequently than he could before. And that's why you see people complaining about things that he could already do. It's because those things are really powerful, but they were kind of kept in check by his weaknesses. Something Arxis really likes to do, and I'm personally not a big fan of it, they really like to just take characters' weaknesses or counterplay to a character and get rid of them. And while that in itself could be acceptable, they don't scale back some of the character's strengths to compensate for those improvements. So in the case of Johnny, he still has other things that are really strong. He has Vault, for example. Vault is a really, really powerful move. Especially paired with like Roman Cancel, doing stuff like, Vault, Roman Cancel, you just get to 50-50 your opponent from that. Very powerful neutral skip. He has a lot of really good things that they could have justifiably toned down a little bit in compensation for his buffs, but they didn't do that. So what it results in is a character that is just very frustrating to fight. On top of this is another problem that I talked about in another video about character health. He just has a lot of health for a character who doesn't really have the downsides that justify having high health anymore. He also has an absurdly good backdash, having one of the best backdashes in the game, and people usually just get very frustrated with good backdashes in this game. So yeah, that basically summarizes why people are complaining about Johnny and why he is a strong character right now. Something I do think is worth noting for this conversation as well is that there was obviously a lot of people who didn't really ever lab Johnny, he didn't really have to know the matchup super well previously because he wasn't as common and he wasn't as good. So part of the backlash we're seeing with Johnny, I think, is just people kind of getting that wake-up call of like, wow, I actually have to lab the character now, right? But even with that said, I still think he is an incredibly powerful character, and most people are putting him somewhere near the top tier currently, and I do think that is correct, personally. Looking forward to Season 4, I am very curious what they do with this character, considering they just buffed him. I'm not sure what their plans are with this character, considering they just buffed him. I don't know if they're just going to play it safe and, take the angle of like, well, maybe people just need to improve against him. Really have no idea what they're going to do with this guy. But anyways, that's just my thoughts. Again, I would love to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Hopefully after this video, it sheds some light on what's going on with Johnny. That's going to do it for me. Thank you all so very much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.